teachers of our country and abroad, those are connected on the Sunday webinar to participate in the virtual academic program. I extend my hearty pranam to all the senior teachers of philosophy and other disciplines that I can see the faces on the screen. I bow down my head before them for their cooperation, for their presence to strengthen the activity of philosophy family. Friends, today we have a very beautiful topic, and it also the concern for all. Today the topic is war crisis and cure, Western perspective. You know, it's the international issue which has sensitized all of us, which has made thoughtful to all the people of the civilized nations. To reflect on this topic, we have invited one of the senior professors of our country who has done a lot of research on international politics, foreign affairs, good governance, a crisis of country, crisis of the international politics, crisis of terrorism. He is with us. He is no other than Professor Amiya Kumar Parichha, the former professor and head PG Department of Political Science, Brahmapur University, Odisha. Before inviting Professor Parichha, let me speak something about his academic pursuits. You know, Professor Amiya Kumar Parichha is a very senior academician of Odisha, of our country. Professor Parichha did his JMA from Brahmapur University in 1976 and PhD from Andhra University in 1985. During this period, Professor Parichha has also did many master degree in different subjects like journalism and degree in law and other subjects. I don't want to repeat them. During his teaching profession in Brahmapur University between 1985 to 2014, he has guided more than 50 MPhil students and more than 15 doctoral scholars. He has also been associated with many academic programs, academic associations. He was the coordinator of NSS of that university for 5 years, and he has a lot of contribution towards the NSS activity of the state and the country. He was also associated with different boards. He was the member board of studies, member university senate board, and board board member in different important affairs of the university. He has contributed more than 50 articles which has been published in national and international repute journals. He has presented a lot of articles in different national and international workshops, seminars, and conferences. He has also organized many seminars and workshops when he was the professor and head in the Department of Political Science, Brahmapur University. He has been invited to different colleges and universities to reflect his thought on international politics, foreign affairs, and other related topics of his interest. Professor Parichha is associated with different forums of political science. He is the life member of All India Political Science Association and All Orissa Political Science Association and many other forums. He has been felicitated by different colleges and universities for his outstanding and lifelong contribution in education, research, culture, and other fields. So I don't want to recite and read out all his contribution for the academics, for the cause of academics, for the cause of research, and for the international politics. I bow down my head before him because he has accepted our invitation to be with us on this auspicious occasion on this Sunday webinar to reflect on his thought. And today, Professor Das will moderate and coordinate the rest part of the program. I welcome Professor Pramod Kumar Das, the host, the admin, and the convener of philosophy family, who has done a lot, who has taken a lot of pain to organize and connect people across the country. And today I also welcome Dr. K. Omnan Rao, the regular moderator. But as he's in South India on a personal work, he will not be available to us. And but he is us, but he will not moderate the uh, rest part of this program. I shall request Professor Pramod Kumar Das to moderate the uh, other programs, the questions and sessions. And with this, once again, I offer my warm welcome and regard to all the teachers and professors across the country and abroad to be with us in this Sunday webinar. And I request now Professor Parichha to commence his speech on the scheduled topic. Pranam, over to Professor Parichha, sir.
Good evening to all the distinguished participants. I hope I am audible. Am I
Audible, sir.
audible?
Audible, sir. Audible, sir.
Good evening to all the participants of today's evening webinar of a philosophy family. I am extremely thankful to Dr. Pramod Kumar Das, who had included me in the philosophy family, though I belong to a different discipline. But since I have been associated with this family, I have enjoyed a lot of discussion, and partly I have learnt a lot also. So it has been a learning process for me also. In that respect, I am thankful to the members of the philosophy family for including me in the fold. And it has been always a pleasure on my part to share my feelings. And as has been introduced today about today's discussion about the concept of war, Western concept. Initially, I was to speak on 15th of May, but unfortunately, my sudden commitment could not provide me that opportunity, so I had sought for an postponement of my presentation. And I am grateful to Dr. Pramod Kumar Das for allowing me for a postponement. So it was initially we had a telephonic discussion, and I have divided my presentation into two parts. The first part about the concept of war ethics, and how over a period of time the ethics related to war had undergone a change, because since time immemorial, because there has been a popular Greek saying, I am putting it the English translation of it. The Greeks always said that if you want to live in peace, you must understand war. So, which implies that throughout the recorded history, war has been an integral part of human life. That is why the Greeks have said that. And interestingly, it was the Greeks who had developed the idea of not only warfare but also concepts related to war ethics, because learned participants are aware about the war and consequences between the two most powerful Greek city states, that is Athens and Sparta, which continued till the outbreak of war by the Alexander the Great, and that brought an end to the whole concept. And it was the Greeks who had developed certain noble concepts like the ambassadors, those who used to represent one Greek city state to another and move from one place to another in the conduct of bilateral relations between the Greek city states. They were exempted from military activities and no harm used to be done because they were involved in the act of promoting their national interest. So promotion of national interest was one of the important guiding factors for the Greeks, and they felt it as a patriotic activity of promoting the national interest. Then the ongoing war that went on between the Greek city-states, they had developed another important concept, that the soldiers who died in the war, they had to be returned to their families. And they always believed that utmost honor be given to the enemy soldiers who died while handing over to their family members. And also timing was fixed for fighting a war, and mostly during daytime only wars were fought, and night war was considered as illegal by the Greek city-states, which in ancient India, the great Mahabharata, which is a great testament of art of leadership, art of fighting war, diplomacy, also emphasizes that war is to be fought only during daytime, and the process they used to follow in Mahabharata was war used to start only when the sun rises and the war immediately comes to an end the moment the sun sets. So that testifies the fact that night warfare was considered immoral. I don't say it as an illegal, but it was considered as immoral, and that moral effect on the behavior of the soldiers, the behavior of the leaders, the behavior of the leaders who pursued diplomacy was so powerful that none of the leaders ever they tried to go beyond the moral limits that were prescribed. So as I have already said, that written accounts of war mostly include in the ancient days and now also mostly include the efforts to explain, to defend, to condone, or to justify of fighting a war. So there can be three ways. One is that when a country fights, whether it is legal or illegal, I will come to that at a later stage, whether it is legal or illegal, act of war has to be defended. And the country that fights a war, or the country that starts a war, we can say is an aggressor. The aggressor always defends that the war is for a just cause. Then there is another school of thought who condone. That is, they say that war is not at all necessary while pursuing bilateral relations or multilateral relations between nations. And there is another school which justify the war. Irrespective of the cause that is involved, war is always justified. So these are the three bases on which arguments have started, right from Greek city-states, which continued with the Romans, which also continued during the Europeans, and it continues till today. So there is a never ending rational answer as to what constitutes a valid ground for being branded a country as an aggressor, and what is the moral limit while fighting a war, and who should prescribe that morality, and if that ethics is to be violated, what are the punishment that one has to take into account. So viewed from that perspective, as I have said, that my first part would deal with about war ethics and the Western perspective, and second aspect, to drive home my argument, I will briefly touch upon the current Ukraine crisis, which is dominating or which has been dominating for the last more than 3 months in international politics and the different international fora, and the never-ending debate continues. And the Ukraine crisis has again brought into the concept about what is the dividing line between war-related violence and war-related ethics. So these are the two. So it is a question whether hen first or egg first. That is what is about the aspects. And in relation to war ethics, right from Greek city-states till today, war analysts, they say that there are three schools of thought relating to war ethics, which guide, are those three elements that guide the decision makers, those who pursue diplomacy, or the commanders who fight war and formulate strategies to deal with enemies. So those are the three realist schools. And the first is realism. So the element of realism constitutes one of the important aspects of war ethics. And in political science also, we teach to the students the realist school of international relations, and the founder of this realist school of international relations was Hans Morgenthau, who was a German political scientist but later settled in United States. And he has opined that whatever may be the causes of war, realism is the most guiding factor. And in realism, he says that Morgenthau says that realism interprets the idea of national power, idea of national interest, and promotion of foreign policy. So these are the three important guiding factors, which Morgenthau says that national power, number one factor, promotion of national interest, and promotion of foreign policy. So there is a great element of similarity between what probably the greatest Indian administrative thinker Kautilya had propounded, where he said the Saptanga theory of state, different 7 organs, in which Kautilya had suggested to Chandragupta Maurya that apart from an attempt to live in peace, diplomacy and war constitutes to be one of the greatest element of national power, and the king at any cost must exercise those national power. So, exercise of national power to demonstrate the national power to other countries about the capability of one particular country, that is one of the most important guiding factor, which ultimately influence a nation to go for a war. And as the learned participants know, that national interest constitutes the primary interest of any particular nation, irrespective of the size or irrespective of the military capability of a nation. A nation would always make an effort to promote national interest and to protect the national interest, and to protect the national interest, a nation would not hesitate to go to war. And Kautilya also had suggested that promotion of foreign policy is one of the main elements which the king must pursue. And while pursuing that, he had classified enemies into different 7 categories. And depending upon the categories of the enemies that Kautilya had classified, he had suggested about the means that are to be adopted in dealing with those different types of enemies. So here comes the question that at times, not always, at times, war may be considered as illegal, but means may be illegal. So war ethics mostly reflects around the concept that irrespective of the cause that influence a country to fight a war, the country that is fighting a war must resort to certain ethical means of respecting the existing laws relating to the laws of warfare. Because laws of warfare is such kind of a legal process which has been changing, because the changing process was necessitated because of the extent of war that was fought. Because in olden days, mostly war was being fought by the infantry, only infantry, that's all. But with the development of technology, air warfare and naval warfare also was considered as most important. Even though the infantry fights the war, Air Force provides the tactical support to the infantry to help the infantry to move forward. And naval warfare has become one of the most important factor. And it was the Spain and the colonial Britain, they had proved to the whole world about how important the naval power has been. And it was the source of naval power that has helped them to expand their colonies all over the world. And British colonial power, I need not elaborate, because learned participants are aware about the processes of colonialism that spread to different parts. At times, the colonial rulers waged war in different parts of the world to strengthen their colonial design. And mostly initially it was an economic content, but later it became a military process. So that was the first school of thought on war ethics, which provide realism. Then the second aspect is what is called as pacifism, because there is another school of thought who always argue that war is not at all necessary irrespective of the provoking conditions. There should be pacific settlement of disputes between the two countries. Either the war can be between the two, or war can be between the two countries, and each country having a group of allies in fighting a war, just like during First and the Second World War, where different allies joined together to form an alliance to fight a war. So the supporters of pacific settlement of international disputes, they always point out that under no circumstances war is essential, and the leaders, the diplomats, and the military bureaucrats, at any cost, they must always try to see that war is avoided through settlement of disputes without using force, which in modern parlance it is called as diplomacy. Even Kautilya also emphasized for diplomacy. He said that war is to be fought, but war is not the only resort. It should not be the final resort. It should be the ultimate resort only when other methods fail. So the second group, that is the pacific settlement of disputes, those who support the pacific settlement of dispute to avoid the war, they have always argued that war is unnecessary. It involves huge destruction and a substantial amount of manpower and economic resources need to restructure a nation which has been devastated by war. And the third theory, which is controversial, and the controversy till continues even till today, which is called as the just war theory. So it is very difficult to explain because war always causes destruction. And destruction is a negative concept, not a positive concept. But rulers, since time immemorial, when wars have been fought, irrespective of the provocation or irrespective of the reason that have provoked them to fight a war, they have always defended that the war is a just war. It is not an unethical war, or it is not an illegal war. So the question here is, what constitutes a just war? The answer to this question about what is the dividing line from where we can say that the war that is fought or that is being fought is a just war is very difficult to answer. So these are the three schools of thought, and they always point out that irrespective of the aspects that provoke, there should be certain ethical forces which should govern the decision makers, the diplomats, and the policymakers who decide policies of diplomacy, politics of fighting war. So these are the about the concepts, the concept of what is called as war ethics that is involved. I am not going to discuss in detail about the Indian concept because earlier it has already been discussed about, because on the 15th May there were two aspects that are to be covered. Myself was given the responsibility of the interpreting the Western concept, which I am doing it today. So as the title of the presentation is Western concept, so I am limiting my presentation only to the Western concept. And in addition to that, if we look at, I am not going to discuss in detail about the European approach to the concept of war, because medieval Europe, the 14th, 15th, and the 16th century, where the Renaissance movement erupted in Europe, and the whole Europe was involved in a crisis between church and the king, whether religion is more powerful or whether politics was more powerful. That was the dominant debate for about more than a century in Europe between 14th and the 15th century. And the 16th century Europe witnessed a great change, and that resulted in the decline of that debate. So I'm not going to discuss about that because I fear time may not permit me to do that. But but to come to the contemporary concept, when I say contemporary, I will limit my presentation to the First and the Second World War. I'm not going to discuss about the reasons that contributed to fight for the First and the Second World War, but the countries, those who were involved in the First World War. First World War was in a limited scale in the sense that in respect to devastation that it has caused, To that extent, it was in a limited scale. But Second World War changed the whole concept of war because ethics was sacrificed, violence, cruelty, human torture, and most unimaginable form of human right violations. Second World War bears testimony to the fact that the most unthinkable violation of human rights had taken place. Some by the Germans, even Americans also were involved in that to the extent that they had used the nuclear weapon against Japan, which has brought an end. So, First and the Second World War again rekindled the debate in respect to war ethics, in respect to the laws of warfare, in respect to whether what constitutes a just war and what constitutes a unjust war, and who is going to declare a war, whether the policymakers or whether the military bureaucrats or the leaders who lead the nation. With the Second World War against the background, I would say that America, perhaps United States of America, is perhaps the only country which has a clear-cut constitutional provision. I don't say that other countries don't have, but United States of American Constitution is perhaps, to my understanding, is perhaps the only constitution which provides a specific provision in the American Constitution that if America is to fight a war, American Congress must declare the war, not the president. So any war, in order to be legal in the United States, must be declared as a war. And that is the reason why the American intervention in Vietnam, America fought the war for more than 15 to 16 years in Vietnam without congressional approval. Simply, the presidents, they took advantage of crisis situation, and initially about 5 advisors were sent to Vietnam to advise Vietnam on security matters. After 1 month, 200 senior officers were sent to give a finishing touch to the Vietnamese military process. 3 months after that, 10,000 soldiers were sent to protect the commanders who were the advisors to the Vietnam government on military affairs. And ultimately, when war in Vietnam ended, there were more than 250,000 American soldiers, and all the soldiers were fighting a war in Vietnam without the approval of the Congress. So that is the kind of, what I mean to say is that that is the kind of the process that the political leadership, they resort to justify that war is a just war and it is not an illegal war. And I have another 25 minutes or so. Then coming to Ukraine, the present crisis, which has been the subject matter of discussion all over the world. And Ukraine has an history of more than 1300 years. It came as Ukraine was born as an independent state in the 9th century, and Russia was born in the 12th century. So history of Ukraine is nearly 1300 years. And in those 1300 years, it had experienced lot of military occupation because Ukraine, right from its establishment, has never been a peaceful country. It has been a subject matter of attraction by all foreign invaders simply because today Ukraine is considered as bread bowl of Europe because its black soil is so fertile, and learned participants might be surprised to know that Ukraine is the largest exporter of wheat to the whole world and food grains. More particularly, the food grain it exports wheat to the whole world and also food grains to the entire Europe. And it has been the bread bowl of entire Europe from 9th century onwards. And since then, it has been in the picture. And today, if we take into account Ukraine's geography, on the northern side of Ukraine, the border nations are Poland and Slovakia, and on the southern side of Ukraine, two important countries, that is Hungary and Romania, are the two important countries which border Ukraine. And it is because of its geographical location, Ukraine has been, as I have said, that center of attraction of all kinds of military activities between the 9th century to 12th century. It was invaded by Poland, Lithuania, and Austria. And between 12th century to 17th century, 12th century to 16th century, it was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, one of the most powerful empire in the world, whose influence stretched to almost two-thirds of the world, beginning from Greek to Eastern Europe and the Western Europe and the Northern Europe. And from 16th century onwards, Ukraine was under the direct control of the Tsar rulers of Russia. And the Tsar rulers were the most autocratic rulers, and they were in continuous war with Japan. So from 16th century to almost to the end of 18th century, entire Russia witnessed, and Ukraine in that also, witnessed all kinds of war-related activities. And as I have said that right from the 9th century onwards, Ukraine had experienced lot of annexation, lot of war, and as the learned participants know, annexation and war means destruction. So Ukraine had a long experience of being a victim of war, being devastated by war, and again rising. So rise and fall due to the destruction of war, and rise after the reconstruction process. That has been an integral part of the Ukrainian political process, which spans over nearly 1300 years. So the current experience of Russian attack on Ukraine is not a new experience in the sense that they have seen devastation, and from devastation they have again reconstructed themselves to emerge as one of the powerful nation in the world. And Ukraine played an important role. Up to 1917, Ukraine was an independent nation. And in 1917, when Russian Revolution started in Russia in protest against the Tsar rule in Russia, and there was the Russo-Japanese War in 1906. Russia lost the war heavily, and there was wide-scale destruction in Russia. And amidst that, the Communist Party of Soviet Union was born, and the Communist Party was successful in convincing the Russian people that now it is time that we must fight against the Tsar. And Russia also lost huge territory to Japan, and Japan had forcibly occupied some of the Russian territories, which is still in controversy even today. So the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, when succeeded in establishing the communist rule, USSR, that is Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, was born in 1922, and Ukraine was the first country to join USSR in 1922. And since then, since 1992 to 1991, till the disintegration of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has been an integral part of Soviet Union, and from 1991, Russia. And today, Ukraine is the second most powerful country in the Russian Federation. And about 25% of the nuclear weapons of USSR was in Ukraine, the long-range missiles. That is what we call it as the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, because Ukraine's geographical location is such that the long-range missiles can be easily fired from Ukrainian soil, which would hit the NATO alliance countries. But in 1991, when Soviet Union was disintegrated, Ukraine declared itself as a militarily neutral power, and it had agreed to dismantle all the nuclear weapons that it had. And by this way, Ukraine was able to establish its military neutrality in denouncing the nuclear weapons. And since then, that is since 1991 to 2013, there was always a controversy in Ukraine among the people, because the western part of Ukraine constitutes the population who are mostly Russians and they speak Russian language. Eastern part of Ukraine, people also are fluent in Russian language, but they have their own Ukrainian language. So culturally, there was a difference in terms of language. In spite of that, the rulers from 1991 to 2013, they were all pro-Russian. But the eastern part of the people who constitute Ukraine has a population of around 4 crores 20 lakhs population. Out of that, around 2 crore 20 lakhs are in the eastern part, who claim to be the original Ukrainians, and they are not in favor of a pro-Russian attitude. Rather, they are in favor that Ukraine should have a close contact with Europe, because Ukrainian location is such that the Ukrainian people can easily access to European borders than to the Russian borders. And that is why they were more inclined to have a better relationship with European Union than with Russia. So from 1991 to 2013, there was a great amount of dissatisfaction among the people of Ukraine that the leaders are more leaning towards Russia, which they never wanted. And in 2013, there was a revolution in Ukraine where the people they started demanding that there should be a change in rulership. And in 2013, there was an election, and the pro-Russian leaders they lost the election, and pro-European leaders they won the election, and there were large-scale political violence that led to the killing of many opposition leaders, and the prime minister resigning and new government coming in. So hide and seek game between the pro-European leaders and pro-Russian leaders that continued till 2019 when Zelensky came to power in Ukraine. The conditions, factors leading to Zelensky coming to power is now in history. I am not going to deal with that in detail because the time wouldn't permit me to do that. But Ukraine has been able to establish as an economic power and industrial power right from 1991. Today, in Ukraine, the largest electric battery production unit, second largest battery production unit financed by European countries is in Ukraine, and it is producing almost around 40% of the electric batteries that are used in different vehicles. It has been even till today one of the largest manufacturer of automobile spare parts which are used by the automobile German giants, whether you name Volkswagen or any automobile manufacturer of Europe, majority of the components are produced in Ukraine and it is supplied. And in addition to that, Ukraine depends on the supply of natural gas from Russia. But as I have said, that the geographical location of Ukraine is such that the gas that is exported from Russia to Ukraine, around 30% of the gas pipeline passes through Ukraine. And Russia is paying huge amount of transport tax to Ukraine, and that is one of the major source of Ukrainian GDP or Ukrainian income source. Then in addition to that, food grains, wheat, then oil seeds, and producing oil, edible oil, I mean to say producing edible oil, they are the largest supplier to European countries. So economically, Ukraine has been one of the important player, and that has attracted the European powers, and it is being alleged, it is yet to be confirmed, but it is being alleged that from 1991, European powers has been secretly providing military assistance to Ukraine to develop its military capability. That is, I guess, a wild speculation because Ukraine on its part also is a major exporter of defense equipments to many parts of the world. So this is what is about Ukraine. And my last part of presentation, another 5 minutes. So the question arises here is, what is the NATO interest in Ukraine? Because Russia has been alleging, or Putin is making allegations that Ukraine is being supported by NATO for an extension of war. And NATO, as the learned participants know, that it is a military alliance formed in 1949. President Truman was the pioneer of the NATO alliance. And Truman, during those times in 1949, because that was the peak that marked the beginning of the peak period of Cold War between USSR and United States. So Truman said that it is not a military alliance. Though there is a military component, but President Truman said that we are the oldest democracy in the world and we have a responsibility to protect democracy in different parts of the world. And Truman said that wherever democracy is threatened, we will make our presence felt. Though President Biden has not directly said that, but NATO's primary target is that Russia is an dictatorial regime. Russia is all set for destruction of democracy, and Ukraine is a democratic country, and any kind of attack on Ukraine is an attack on democracy. And NATO believes that any attack on democracy is their responsibility to protect democracy. Putin's allegation is that the more Ukraine makes an attempt to become closer to Europe, European Union in general, and NATO in particular, the greater there is an element of national threat of national interest to the Russians. And Putin said that as long as that threat of national interest to Russia continues, Russia would go for an military action. That is why in February 2013, in midnight, he called the commanders and he said that Russia would redesign its promotion of national interest, and all of a sudden, on 14th February, a war was declared on Ukraine. So now the question is, how long it will continue war? Zelensky, it is believed, and I have every reason to believe, learned participants may differ. Zelensky is more worried that the war should come to an end immediately because he believes that longer the war, European Union and NATO may not take more interest in protecting Ukraine, and Ukraine would be left out alone to defend itself. That is the factor that is dominating in Zelensky's decision-making process, where he is more keen that the war should come to an end, whatever may be the consequences. Russia also is more worried because whether one wins the war or one loses the war, it is a destruction to both the parties. Russia also had suffered a large-scale damage to its military reputation. What I mean to say is that the military reputation, because the kind of strength that Russia enjoys with the second largest nuclear power in the world, the prolonged war in Ukraine definitely had impacted the Russian capability. Just like, American dignity was dented when a tiny country, Vietnam, could resist for more than 15 years to the American strength. So Russia also is more concerned, and Putin is more worried that if the longer the war, there may be more damage to the military reputation of Russia, and Putin also is more interested to bring an end to the military conflict between Russia and Ukraine. But the question is, who is going to bell the cat? Both the leaders have made their intention open, but as I have discussed earlier, the element of a pacifism, that is pacific settlement of disputes, somebody has to come forward, because the aggressor and the victim, they are never going to come open, because aggressor will never admit the defeat, or the victim will never agree that we are completely destroyed and we want to surrender. So that is the kind of dilemma that both Russia and Ukraine is facing. And amidst this kind of the ongoing military conflict that has been going on for the last more than 3 months in Ukraine, now a debate has come up in respect to war ethics, and learned participants know much better than me that is there is a wide range of differences in approach between Indian perspective of war ethics and the Western concept of war ethics, where the Indian concept of war ethics is more guided, influenced by customs, traditions, long established traditions, which our great testaments, whether it was the Ramayana or Mahabharata or Anusasana Parva or the Sukraniti or whatever the documents that we rely upon, they have our Kautilya's Arthashastra, who have made a great widening range of interpretation of different aspects. There is a great range of differences in approach of relating to war ethics between Indian perspective and Western perspective. And the cure for the bringing an end to the war also is different, because it entirely depends upon how to bring an end to the long conflict. It entirely depends upon the military might of the countries involved and the damage that they had suffered, and to what extent they can accept the damage, or what constitutes the acceptable level of damage. That has been one of the most debatable points all through the human history. And I would conclude by saying that the debatable, the controversial debate that would continue as long as the mankind goes to fight a war, irrespective of the reason, or irrespective of the aggressor, or irrespective of the country on which the attack is made. So thank you everybody for giving me a patient listening. Now my presentation is open for debate. Thank you everybody.
Thank you, Professor Parichha, for delivering a wonderful talk on war ethics, war crisis and its cure. I shall give my observation later. So now it is open for discussion. We have with us very few participants and very eminent scholars, professors of philosophy, Professor Ranjit Ghosh sir, Professor Avinash sir. So now I shall request Professor Ghosh to present his observation. Over to Ranjit Ghosh sir.
Thank you, Professor Das. Now, Professor Parichha has given a very detailed discussion of the origin of the Russia-Ukraine war and the ongoing happenings that is still taking place in the Russia-Ukraine war. But as students of philosophy, we are mostly concerned with the question about a just war. So our concern should be just war theory. That means, what is a just war? Just war holds that war as an end is ethical, whereas means may be unethical. This is the first thing. Now, another thing which is to be taken into consideration so far as a just war theory is concerned, 5-6 points are there. That means time. Time means when all the negotiations fail, then two parties they enter into war. Then target. What where the war where the two parties will make target. That is another thing. And the third one is weapons. What type of weapons are to be used? Whether they are to use the conventional weapons or the biological weapons, that is one thing. And then the rules of the war. This should be also followed. Then two more other things which are important, that when the war takes place, prisoner of war, and this is one important aspect which is concerned with the human rights. So that is to be taken into consideration. And lastly, there should not be any genocide by the warring parties. So these are the things which are to be taken into consideration so far as the just war theory. In the just war theory, we have to take into consideration all these aspects. Now, this is also coming under the, as Professor Parichha knows, as a man of international relation, these things are coming under the Geneva Convention. So, these are to be adhered strictly, but also along with this, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are also to be adhered, but they are not normally maintained. This is the thing. Now, the thing is that what I personally believe, and he is an authority on this, he can say that when the Cold War period is over, there should not be any the continuation of a military alliance like NATO. And NATO should be abolished, first of all. This is my solution, of course, from what I have gathered from the ongoings. And secondly, US should stop playing the role of a globocop, that he is the controlling authority and he should control the entire world. Now, you see, you can give one example that on several occasions, Kim is trying to provoke, North Korea is trying to provoke US, but US never bothers about this, saying that it is such a poor and small country. If we intervene and through war, then there will be a great loss to the humanity. This is what the US says. But these things are not to be taken into consideration. US's policy after at the time of First World War and Second World War, well, we can say that US was following the policy of self-aggrandizement, and that is also national interest is all right. But after this post-Second World War situation, as well as the abolition of the Cold War, what happens that US is trying to poke its nose in every affairs throughout the world, and we have seen the disastrous consequences as well in Vietnam, in Afghanistan, everywhere. And this time in Afghanistan, US left the country. US came just to check Russia, but that was during the period of prior to the period of globalization, and it was a period of Cold War. But presently, the way Biden left US, Afghanistan, it is definitely not a humanitarian stance on the part of US. And Afghanistan as a country suffers, and it also tries to develop all sorts of cross-border terrorism, and India is also suffering because of that. So these are some, and in this connection, I would further say that take the case of Kautilya and Mahabharata, the war, just war. In Kautilya, we find the discussion of war, as well as in Mahabharata, we also find the discussion of war and just war. Now, take the case of rules. The one rule was there that there should not be, the war should stop at the sunset. Now, this type of rules and so many other rules were followed very meticulously during the Mahabharata war. Still, we find certain unethical things, like, and we know the example, how Dronacharya was killed, and Yudhishthira told the lie that Aswathama Hatha iti gaza. So the thing is, what we find that in just war theory, war as an end is ethical, but the means may be unethical. These are the small observations on my part. Thank you.
Yes, Professor
Thank
Bose,
you,
you are
Professor.
right, because genocide has been one of the most important causes, and the Nuremberg trial, learned participants must be aware of it. The Geneva Protocol, then in addition to that, the additional protocols, three or four additional protocols, even they also had pointed out that night warfare is illegal. Just like Mahabharata, where it is said, they followed the principle that war should come to an end when the sun sets. Similarly, the additional protocols that were signed, additional protocol 2, 3, and 4, they even declare, and today that is still in force, that night warfare is considered as illegal. Use of chemical weapons, use of biological weapons is illegal. And Geneva Protocol also had pointed out certain guidelines as to, you have very rightly said about the timing. Timing of the war is more important, and the target. So, target in the sense that civilians should not be the target. Then the places where food, essential stocks are kept, they should not be the target. Industrial establishments should not be the target. Means of communication should not be the target. But today's war attempt, if we see, the targets which have been declared to be not to be touched by the Geneva Protocol, they become the first victim. So, as you have very rightly said, that war may be ethical, but the means are mostly unethical, where civilian population immediately become the target than the military establishments. And Russia is exactly following, I believe that Putin is exactly following the same method which Hitler had followed, that the target of Russia as far as Ukraine is concerned is the gas supply, because gas is essential for survival, not for us, but around two-thirds of the world where sub-zero temperature exists. And natural gas is one of the important elements which keeps them warm, the homes remain warm, and life survives. So that becomes an essential part. And Putin had struck almost all important oil refineries, cut the military oil supplies to different essential establishments. Essential establishment in the sense that most of the people in Ukraine today they live in bunkers. And to allow the bunker to have a living condition, it needs certain technical methods like supplying natural gas to those chambers where the life essential, minimum essential life support system, that is filtering the water to make it drinkable. Then in the bunker, essential foods are stored. So they should be kept in minimum temperature so that they can be fit for human consumption, so that people can survive. So those are some of the important. Even in 2013, in Dublin, in Ireland, there was a protocol meeting of the foreign ministers of around 173 countries, including some of the military experts, where they had suggested to all the member countries who were the signatory to United Nations protocol that use of chemical weapons during warfare and biological weapons should be declared as illegal. That was the resolution that was passed. All the countries they had agreed. But as all of you know, that a international protocol, in order to become a law, you must suitably amend your national law to make it as a part of the international component. And that has not been done by many of the countries, those who has taken the leadership. So the question here is that there will be, as I have said, that there will be unending debate as to what is just war, how to draw a demarcating line between a just war and unjust war, and how to prevent that. That is going to be one of the major challenge to not only the policymakers but to the mankind. as long as that kind of challenges or methods to are not evolved to meet those kind of challenges, the unending debate of just war and unjust war, that would continue to exist. That we cannot prevent it. Although we may arrive at a consensus that the means that are followed are quite illegal, violation of extreme violation of human rights, that is taking place, whether it is war or no war, even during conflicting crises or internal conflicting situations, there are widespread allegations of violation of human rights, not only in one part but in almost all parts of the world. Whether America is doing the same thing on the blacks, the Negroes are still not free. I have many Negro friends in America who provide lot of narratives whenever we interact about the kind of white dominance. Learned participants are aware about, the blacks who were subjugated by the whites in South Africa, the policy of apartheid. Those were definitely, I would say, as a blatant violation of human dignity or dignity of human being to survive. Because if you want to live a human being, you must live with certain dignity. And human rights provides a kind of a guideline which gives us a source of inspiration that there exists certain kind of a protocol, there exists certain principles which make us to feel like that we must live like a human being with dignity. And those aspects are today absent as far as modern parlance is concerned. And I don't foresee in near future there can be an consensus, there can be an agreement between the West or the East, or between the powerful and the less powerful, or in terms of different types of international fora where such kind of debates do take place.
Thank you, Professor Parichha, for your.
Professor Parichha, don't you think that only at the present scenario, only economic alliances are necessary? No military alliance should be there. But they are not listening to it because they just keep economic cooperation in the front, on the forefront, but ultimately they are trying to serve their interest of selling the arms and other things to the NATO countries, so that for that reason only they are making this alliance. So you can say it is a type of negative economic alliance that we are getting through this type of military alliance. How do you...
Yes, you are right. Economic integration is the most important aspect, and I can give an example of European Union. Say, if you take European Union, to my understanding, there are about 4 or 5 powers who were the major invaders, major colonial power, whether Spain, Britain, France, Portugal, all those were, the greatest colonialists. And European Common Market in the 50s and European Union later, that is an eye-opener to the whole world. That, they have differences. They have differences in terms of, religion. They have an advantage that religion is the common binding force. Though they speak different language, but they are bounded by the Christianity. To forget about the different sects. But Christianity is the binding force. That is one of the advantages that they enjoy. But I always believe, even I cite examples whenever I get an opportunity, that European Union is perhaps one of the most positive aspect of a integrating factor, which has integrated European Union into one unit. Though Britain has exited from it through Brexit to have its own currency. But today, I have 2 or 3 friends in Oxford University. About a month back, I had visited Singapore and stayed for about 6 weeks with my son. So accidentally, I met one of my friends from Oxford University, whom I had met. So he was narrating that now British people are more in favor of integrating into the European Union than they are not in favor of Brexit. Political leaders may be promoting it, but common people in Britain, they are more in favor of integrating into the union, because for about 30 years they had experienced the benefit of integrating into the European Union, because Britain, France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal, these five are the important industrial powers. And Britain apart, France, Portugal, and Italy are the three classic examples of getting the highest benefit of integrating into the economic union. And France is today one of the most important industrial power. And Europe cannot exclude now France. Europe cannot think of excluding France. Italy is a major agricultural power. And more importantly, they give less because of benefits of economic integration. Though they have military capability, but they attach less importance to military strength, because, and that has been acting as one of the benefit, because the resources that are being diverted to military purposes, they are what is called as unutilized resources. Because say nuclear powers, they go for nuclear weapon with the hope that there may be a threat. The threat doesn't exist. So you are diverting a part of your major resources to a non-productive expenditure, which is giving you more tension, which is giving, because which America had faced, say during Cold War, which Star Wars program, which America had developed, because Soviet Union and now Russian weapons are more attacking weapons. American weapons are more defensive weapons. Around 70% of the American nuclear weapons are defensive. It will only defend, it cannot attack. Soviet weapons are more attacking weapons, not defending weapons. So Americans in 1980, Ronald Reagan, they realized that majority of their weapons are only defensive weapons, and if one long-range nuclear missile hits a particular target, 30 to 40% of its striking capability would be lost. So Reagan pointed out that all those long-range defending missiles should be kept airborne, not in the land, so that would be free from attack by the opponent. And that became so costly, because they developed certain kind of spacecraft which continuously kept flying in keeping those nuclear weapons. They have to be continuously refueled, and that put a lot of pressure on the American economy. And experts say that the decline of American economy from number 1 to number 3 started from that period, because huge amount of American GDP was diverted to non-productive purposes. And European Union have realized that diverting huge amount of resources means that diverting for non-productive purposes. And that is a classic example of how economic integration would pay you more benefit pending the increasing expenditure on military. You are very right. So economic integration is more important as far as lessening the military conflict or military tension is important. You are very right in pointing out that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ranjit sir, for your beautiful question, and we are really grateful to Professor Parichha for his beautiful response. And now we have with us Professor Abhinav Srivastavji. I shall request him to give his observation. Sir, please.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me first congratulate Professor Amiya Parichha, sir, for delivering a wonderful lecture and beautifully analyze the things, what is going on in Ukraine and Russia particularly. And in that way, he has tried to explain what sort of warfare should take place. And he talked about the just war, and he has analyzed the things in a proper way. And he has also taken the example of the Indian context. When I try to examine these things in the Indian context, we have two models of war theory. One is when your interest is going to be hampered, you must fight for that. And that's why Krishna says, Tasmadutisthaya Konteya Yuddhaya Kritnishchaya, because the Pandavas' interests were being hampered very worstly because the Kauravas were not at all in mood to give even a point of land to the Pandavas, and that's why this has to be done. And second example is of the Buddha. There was a Collier and Shakya once were to fight a huge war, and since Buddha was also a great warrior of the time, and he has won the test when in the battle in the test of the warfare. So that's why he too was present there. And there, what did he say? For what we are waging the war? And that is for the trivial water. You tell me what is more costly, water or the blood? And finally, it was said, for water we cannot save the blood. But coming to the context of Russia and the Ukraine, the things is not totally different to each other, because Russia was also scared that if NATO and the European Union comes to the border, he will be getting insecure. And since the insecurity is so great that his power is going to be challenged there. And Ukraine is helping in that way the European Union to be closer to him and make his position, make the Russian position vulnerable by the presence of the NATO armies or the presence of the European Union. And this is the reason this war was waged. Secondly, when it was divided from Russia, the Ukraine, naturally both must have the affinity in between, because earlier they were the one union, they were one nation, and that's why Russia was expecting that he will decline the offer of the European Union and the NATO not to be the member, because it will threaten his position and power as well, because power position matters here. And this is the reason the war started. I tell you very honestly, both were not at all in mood to wage the war for such a longer period. But the moment they have waged the war, it is also the duty of the soldier or the head of the nation now to desist from that, because one should not leave the war. And in that way, the just war theory said by Professor Parichha, Amiya Parichha, comes in between. And then we will have to take into consideration how the war has to be waged. So when there are two things, how to stop the war, how to wage the war, and how to make an end of the war. And in between, the dialogue between Professor Ghosh and Amiya Parichha was wonderfully narrated the entire thing. I congratulate him, but one question is there, that how we can come at the amicable solution so that both the parties can desist from the disaster which is impending upon the universe, because we are not isolated from the entire rest of the world, and if anything takes place in a particular space of the globe, naturally the rest space of the globe is threatened positively or negatively. So by narrating all these things, I think he must also provide some solution of this conflict resolution, resolving the conflicts between the two, and what should be the ideal position for that. Thank you, sir.
See, in modern parlance, it is said that because the war has become so sophisticated compared to the manner in which war were being fought, say, 2 decades ago, modern war has become extremely sophisticated because of sophisticated technology being used. So here the question arises is war would automatically come to an end the moment when both the parties they feel that neither they can win the war or nor they can lose the war, and enough damage has been caused. That is one aspect where Vietnam war that comes to my mind, because I remember very well that in the Vietnam war around more than 1 lakh American soldiers were killed, and the widows in the United States, they staged a protest in the front of White House, demanding that when American interest in no way is involved in Vietnam, why our husbands were sent to fight a war where no American interest was involved, and the nation needs an answer from the policymakers. That was one of the most impacting factor on American policymakers to withdraw, because they realized that enough damage has been caused to their reputation, military reputation, because one missile would have been enough to completely destroy the whole of Vietnam, but Vietnam could withstand. Same is the case of United States, which Professor Ghosh was pointing out, that America has been behaving like a headmaster, school headmaster, or with a stick. Same is the case as far as Afghanistan is concerned, where around 50 to 70,000 American soldiers were killed, and their family members also were putting pressure on President Obama. It was President Obama who had decided that in 2016 America would withdraw from Afghanistan, but due to different factors, the soldiers could not be withdrawn. But one important danger that Afghanistan is facing today is that some secret landmines which American soldiers had planted. When the American soldiers left Afghanistan, they had not disabled those landmines. And when the Afghan farmers are trying to cultivate the land, they become the victim of those landmines which has not been disabled by the Americans. So war ethics leaves many questions unanswered. Not only the victim, but also the innocent victims. That is what is more important. So where the question of violation of human rights, where the question of genocide, which has been a debatable point in the Nuremberg trial of immediately after the Second World War, and the Nuremberg trial till continues. The major culprits against whom the charges were leveled, many of them have died. Many of them have died. But that leaves behind many unanswered questions, and it is very difficult to work out a solution as to what exactly would be a method, what exactly would be an approach to bring an end to the war. But one aspect is universal, that is modern war cannot be fought for an unlimited period, because war cannot be fought and won. It is very difficult nowadays in modern warfare, it is very difficult to win a war. As Afghanistan issue has pointed out, when the Soviet Union had intervened in Afghanistan in 1979, when I was doing my PhD at that time, there were a lot of debate as to a mighty force like Soviet Union had taken a wrong decision in interfering into a tiny Afghanistan. But there were political factors, as Professor Ghosh was pointing out, about the American intention and later the Soviet intention also. So I always believe that there cannot be a particular formula universally acceptable as the only solution for bringing an end to war, because conditions are different, geographical locations are different, target is different, objective is different. So war is governed by different factors. Your target, your objective, the motive also is more important. What kind of a motive that you want to achieve. That is what is more important. But when multiple factors are involved, it is very difficult to bring it down to one particular approach to point out that this is an universally acceptable, universally agreeable formula that can be adopted. But nevertheless, I said that there can be many approaches, and it is for this reason the never-ending debate that is definitely bound to continue. And in near future, I don't find any foreseeable, acceptable, logical solution to the kind of this war, whether we call it as ethical or unethical.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Wonderful, wonderful. We have with us Dr. Srinivasan Krishnamurthy ji. He came late, but I shall request him.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Sir, please.
Speech of Professor Amiya relating to war cure and Western. Tantalizing, I would say, because it could relating to the war methodology and yes. But I would like to, request Professor, this kind of situation, they are not taking any concrete action. 100 days, and every day Putin is he will not hesitate to use nuclear bombs. It is a threat which goes on like the North Korean leader who has been also telling the same. Yes, it's only China who has not spoken about anything about this war. The nuclear, weapons that might be used. Under such circumstances, I don't think it serves any purpose because they are not taking any concrete action. Even if you take previous wars like Vietnam, as you rightly said, but to my knowledge, you were telling about the unlimited war. It cannot be limited, you said. But unfortunately, a couple of days back, the British Prime Minister, Mr. Boris Johnson, was telling may prolong up to 20 years. It was real shocker. About the war, lords and deployment of arms, nuclear, disaster and all. We cannot proceed like this anyway. However, I would like to have your kind view on this, sir, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding China, it is a different aspect altogether because that would take a long time for me to deal on that. But I would say that China has a Chinese world order. They have a different perception. They always believe because they are undoubtedly unchallenged military power, but they don't want to, or they don't believe that it is military might alone that can promote the national interest of a country. Rather, the Chinese, they believe in a different way. That is the economic process that is going to establish the ascendancy of a nation. And the result, as you all know, that today none of the country in the world can ignore China in terms of economic factors, economic aspects. So China is undoubtedly a unavoidable economic power which none of the countries can avoid, not even America or not even Germany, Brazil, say Britain, even France. I have just given the example of those countries who are the members of original G7 are now today G20 countries. So China has proved to the world that one country may have military capability, but military capability alone is not going to establish your ascendancy. Rather, it must be military strength must be supported by a strong economic power, and China has proved to the whole world. That is why we find always that whenever there is a global crisis in respect to military activities, China always maintains a silence, because if it opens up, it may lead to a different kind of a military equation in the world. And Chinese perception of global order is more economic factor, and that is why China maintains always silence, because the Sri Lankan factor, the conditions that prevail today in Sri Lanka, the condition that prevail today in Pakistan, the condition that prevail today in Nepal are smaller nations. What they do is they give more financial assistance than a country is capable of. And when the question of repayment comes, China says, don't pay us. You extend these facilities to us. That is how they have penetrated into the whole world through their economic power. That is one aspect. Second aspect about war issues, as I have said, that in a near foreseeable future, I don't find a kind of a global consensus, global logical consensus on a means to bring an end to the war. Boris Johnson's statement, as you have said, that is why even in my presentation I have pointed out that Zelensky is more worried that if war continues longer, European Union may lose interest, and Russia also is more worried that if war prolonged to a longer time, it will dent its military reputation. So it is a question of who will build the cat. And in a war situation, when there is a war between unequal partners, this kind of controversy is bound to exist. And there is no possibility of use of any nuclear. I don't see any possibility of any use of nuclear weapon, because nuclear weapon equation is a different kind of a equation, which time would not permit me to make a presentation. Independently, if I get an opportunity, I may make my presentation. But I don't see that there can be a possibility of use of nuclear weapons. There are many factors, not a single factor. There are many factors, but thank you, Professor Krishnamurthy, for adding it to the already debate that we had taken place.
Thank you, sir. Srinivasan ji, will you speak anything?
I thought I can just request him about a point on United Nations.
We could not hear you, sir, properly. Please repeat, sir.
Will you please repeat, Krishnamurthy sir, what you have said? Because it was not audible, maybe due to technical problem.
No, sir, sorry, I just inquired about the role have lost, like Mahatma Gandhi, Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, Leo Tolstoy, and Martin Luther Kings, like that. We don't find in this world.
You see, the global environment that prevailed during those great personalities that you would refer to was different, because the war and ethical values during those days was something different, and war-related laws and ethical values and perceptions of the leaders who fight the war and who take the decision relating to fighting a war are completely different, but my perception is that the ideals that they had propounded, the conditions were different, the situations were different, and their ideals were achieving a specific target, a specific objective, specific purpose. Beyond that, they never spoke anything. Mahatma Gandhi's fight all through his career was to help India to win freedom. But after freedom, what he had never talked about it. And if I'm right, he was the first person who advocated that Congress should be dismantled because the objective of the Congress was to help India to win freedom. And since India has won freedom, now Congress has no role to play in making a new India. So the environment, the background against which influenced them to develop their ideal, they were something different. And the issues that we are debating today, the environment is something different. We cannot equate the ideals of the great leaders in respective countries to the kind of present scenario that we find today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, now this is time to conclude. So, I have no words to.
Sir,
Yes, yes, Rao sir. Please have your response, sir. Please.
no, not exactly response. Well, I was listening to the entire deliberation. Well, much has been discussed on the politics of war. My concern is much on the ethics of war, the philosophy of war. Well, what Professor Parichha has tried to see is whether war is necessary or war is not necessary. Well, to the point that war is necessary, he has. We can associate with the philosophy that everything is fair in love and war. Okay, that is the Western concept that we have. But when you talk of war and ethics, well, there is. I don't think any sort of parallel can be drawn between war and ethics, and I feel a bit nervous in associating ethics with war, especially even during what we call the Mahabharata war as the Dharma Yuddha. Even ethics could not be associated during those times. Okay, but these days there is no ethics. When we talk of war, any sort of association of ethics with war is a misnomer, as I feel, because as Professor Parichha tried to say that the usage of chemical weapons or the nuclear weapons is illegal. Well, there is an arms race, open arms race for nuclear weapons, for the chemical weapons, what for all. But maybe we are not using today under the fear of something, but there is a race for it. So that shows there is no ethics, there is no what to say, there is no concern, there is no ethical concern in war. So why this feeling comes to me? Because even even for the Dharma Yuddha, that could not be found, that could not be fought with ethics. Okay, even there were certain norms that could not be followed. Say, for example, say the ethics was that there should be one-to-one war, and that was violated with war with say, Abhimanyu when it was put into Chakravyuha. So that was one thing where ethics has been violated. You talk of Ashwatthama. He tried to kill the Pandavas when they were asleep. Well, Pandavas were not there. It was escape. But you see the ethics there. Was there any ethics? So even you talk of Maryada Purushottama Rama, he tried to kill. Well, he killed Bali from hiding from behind. So even during those days, ethics was not there. Even when you talk of Dharma Yuddha, you will talk of Rama. So ethics, when you talk of war, it's a war. So any sort of association of ethics with war is a misnomer, which I feel. So how do you see, sir? Thank you.
So, may I say something in this connection?
Yes.
In fact,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in fact, what happens when ethics has been lost, when there is a crisis of the dharma and the ethics in the world, and unethical things takes place very regularly, To in order to fight, in order to establish the ethics, the morality on the earth, we have to fight the war. Dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Now, second question is, if there are so many unethical things have been taken into consideration in order to win the war, the one thing is very much clear: when your enemy is so strong that the virtuous war, the fair war is not able to help you, you can take a loophole and you can win the war, because your main purpose is to establish the ethics, to establish the dharma, to reform, to establish the social harmony, and for that, in minor things can be mistaken. It is because it is from the point of view of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. But when we come to the Buddha, the things changes all the time, and he says, it is drastically says, he says, nahi verena verani sammanti dha kudachana averena cha sammanti esu dhammo sanantano. Because we cannot end the enmity with the enmity. This non-enmity and the love, affection and compassion, sympathy and empathy will help to establish peace in the society. And that's why I say, when the Kaliya kingdom and the Shakya kingdom were face to face for the water of the river, then what did Buddha say? He was not Buddha that time, Siddhartha was there. Because since he was a warrior, he comes from a Kshatriya family, he has to participate in the warfare, and that's why he was there. And he was one of the greatest warrior of the time. So, but what did he say? For what you are fighting the war? For water, a trivial water, which is more costly, blood or the water. So, when we talk of the war, we have to consider both the things. You will have to take any action to establish the dharma on the earth. Or secondly, you forget your enmity. But in modern times, the religion has also made another dimension. You just see today what is happening in India. It is a mini Grihyuddha. It is a mini which is going to be staged here. So we cannot forget this dimension also, particularly, but though it is not so in the Ukraine and Russia war, but we will have to forget our petty things, and then only we can achieve the global formula of ethics so that the war can be ended. Because we have two things, Yuddha and Buddha. If everyone wants peace, no one wants war. But today what is happening, in order to establish peace, the war is being waged.
Last comment.
One thing, let me add to what Professor Srivastava has said. Well, war is necessary. Well, I do agree. It is necessary, but what it all is the output of war. After a lot of devastation with lot of loss of life and property, then you go on to realize that peace is necessary. So why don't you think of peace first of all? If at all war is for peace, so why that mindset is not coming up? Okay, if at all war, you justify war, you go on to say that war is going to establish a greater thing, then well, it's all right. But why don't you think that, after all, if the objective is to establish peace, so why not open forum should be set up before going on for war? When I do understand that when dialogues do fail, you go on for war, but what at all that aggression is going to finally give you? So it is all devastation. Everything is loss of lives. When you don't understand the individual pain, the loss of lives of a family. So after all devastation, then you realize, well, a lot of things have been lost. So why not peace? Why that mindset is not coming? We are human beings. So that animal factor is still with us. We talk of humanity. Where is this humanity? We are still animals. If you are going for war, it's animal feature. It's not a human feature. So if you are human beings, if you try to be human, so you should always think of peace, and war is always an animal factor. It's not a human factor. Thank you.
That's why I said, sir, I said the war cannot end the war. It is love and peace that can end the war. Nahi verena verani sammanti dha kudachana Averena Sammanti, Isu Thamusan. Thank you,
So
sir.
thank you both of you. I always believe that war and ethics do not go together, because war means destruction, war means devastation, and destruction and devastation, when destruction and there is a condition of destruction and devastation, ethics has no place. Then there can be two types of war. One is a short war, maybe 1 day, 2 days. In the short war, perhaps some element of ethics can be possible, but longer the war, greater the unethical means. And recorded history says that from Second World War till to date, nearly 1700 wars have been fought, and 99% of the wars have been short-term wars. And in short-term wars, there have never been any complaint of violation or pursuance of unethical means. Longer the war, greater the unethical means, which can crisis. So I always believe that it is always a misnomer to talk about ethical means when we are fighting a war, because the longer the war, greater the determination of the participants. Particularly if it is a one-to-one war, the participants become more determined to win. And when you become more determined to win, you can adopt any kind of means. And ethical means has no place, because the participants, they believe that their survival is at stake. So when you have come to a condition to realize that your survival is at stake, peace, ethics, respect to humanity, human values, or human dignity has no place at all. So it is always a misnomer to talk about ethics when countries are fighting a war. So thank you, everybody, for giving me a patient listening and opportunity also to interact with others.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So now this is time to conclude. So it was an wonderful session. Today's topic was war crisis, not war ethics. War crisis and its cure. So Professor Parichha very beautifully justified what is war crisis. Okay. The topic was not war ethics, but war crisis. And he elaborately explained what are the issues relating to the cause of war. And when the second part of the talk was the cure, what is the cure? That is the ethical part. Because, but I don't I disagree with him, Professor Parichha, when he concluded his speech with the response of both Dr. Rao and Srivastava, because it is not matching the first part and the last part. I shall give an example, and we all have that experience in our family. When husband and wife quarrel, they fight, the child should not be disturbed. This is the minimum ethics. The war between nations, it is a big issue. If at all there is a war between husband and wife, fight may be very normal fight, but the child should not be disturbed. So we have two choices, two types of examples of families. That in some family we see that husband and go for divorce. They always fight. Father comes late, being in a rough mood, and beats his wife. and there is a that is the family crisis. And in that situation, the child is disturbed. The child is innocent, who does not know the relation between husband and wife. He or she is innocent fellow who is disturbed. But there are some rational parents. They are very much conscious about it. They know what parenting is. They quarrel because fighting between husband and wife is very natural. But they quarrel in the absence of the child, so that the child will not be disturbed. They come for compromise. They sacrifice. They negotiate. Here comes ethics. Because war is natural. War is natural. Disagreement is natural. Number one. Number two, without war, ethics cannot be established. Therefore, in the Bhagavad Gita, actually I don't refer to Bhagavad Gita. When we are discussing war, there is no Indian perspective or Western perspective. It is only human perspective, because only human beings go for any war. Animals don't fight. Animals act according to their natural instincts. They don't know what fighting is. They don't have any war concept. Only human beings fight because they are very much intelligent and rational. So war is a human possibility. And war is a conscious affair. It is not an accident. Consciously, we get involved in a war situation. So it is conscious. It is conscious activity. Referring to Bhagavad Gita, we shall say, in order to protect dharma, dharma means ethics. In order to protect dharma, war is necessary. I am giving an example. Suppose a criminal is murdering, is killing so many people on the road. That means he is doing adharma. He has no right to kill innocent people. At that time, the police officer should shoot without any choice. Otherwise, ethics will not be established. Otherwise, we cannot save the common people. If there is an injustice in our college or in our governance, in everywhere, if we find any injustice, we have to raise our voice. That raising up voice is war. War does not mean that the nucleus war. War does not mean the war between two nations. War comes from our psychic trait. As the child should not be disturbed by the fighting between husband and wife, similarly, when two nations are fighting, the inmates, not the outside people, even the inmates of Ukraine or Russia, they should not be disturbed. That is the ethics. They should not be disturbed. How we are alive today, how we are discussing about this topic, how we are maintaining this webinar, because we are alive in spite of the 3 months or 2 months continuous war between two nations. It is because of that ethics we are not disturbed yet. We are not disturbed yet. Otherwise, one atom bomb is sufficient to destroy the entire world. Why that is not used? That is not used because we have a moral consciousness. We have an ethical consciousness that the third person should not be disturbed. But in the process of war, innocent people will be killed because we cannot save all people. But that, what is the mindset? What is the intention? The intention should be that the third person, the innocent people, should not be killed. Therefore, India took the right decision to escape the Indians from the land of Ukraine. This is the ethical consciousness, because they are fighting. So we have that concern to save our people. And war was stopped after the interference of Modi, Modi ji, Narendra Modi ji, our Prime Minister, he interfered and the war was stopped. So somewhere there is an ethical consciousness. Therefore, we are discussing, we are negotiating. These things are there. So my point is, ethics can be maintained or dharma can be maintained through war. Through war means through revolution. Another name of war is revolution. Another name of war is protection. Another name of war is raising your voice against injustice. Therefore, there is an opposite party of the government. So, war should be democratic by nature. Suppose India will go for a war. Perhaps it has happened. Opinions will be taken from the common people. You give your opinion in favor of a war or not war. This is the democratic way because they are going to be involved in the war process. Innocent people will be killed. Very surprisingly, when it is found, in order to maintain justice, in order to protect dharma, in order to protect the ethical value, common people will come forward to help the guardian of the country for the war. That is the democratic way of war, where not only the president, not only the prime minister, not only the military force, each and every individual citizen of the country will participate in war only to protect dharma, protect ethics. What is that dharma? What is that ethics? That is contextual. What type of a problem will come in which time? That may differ. What was the prediction of Putin? That I can conquer Ukraine within 1 week. But why he failed? Because that imagination, that prediction will not work. Because there is a willpower of a common man. There is the willpower. When the common citizen of Ukraine, they came forward and they gave a moral support to their president. That may be a small land, therefore the war is continuing since now. It's continuing. It was not expected. We all had that impression that Ukraine can be destroyed within 1 week or maximum 15 days. So that is the moral consciousness. That is the strength. So that works. So the crisis is that so war is natural. War means if there is no war, there is no protection of ethics. War ethics, I very honestly, today I shall appreciate the comment and observation of Professor Ranjit Ghosh sir. Very honestly, I really appreciate. He gave many beautiful points. Of course, that was from Indian perspective. But I say nothing is Indian perspective or Western perspective. War is war. And the war is war between two human beings or two countries where human beings live. And if we shall speak in the broader sense, in the war, animals are also killed. Plants are destroyed. The environment becomes polluted. So war is the question of existence and non-existence. One nucleus bomb is sufficient to destroy our existence. So we exist only because of the ethical values. Otherwise, we don't have any existence. The last point, We are taking the example of Ramachandra, we are taking the example of Dronacharya, we are taking the example of many others who have adopted unethical principles in the war field. Such cases are there in the story of the war, but ethics is ethics. Even Lord Krishna will commit some unethical way to favor Arjuna. Lord Krishna is unethical. If Ramachandra is unethical, Ramachandra is unethical. Here nobody is excused. I have told many times that even God is not excused so far as dharma is concerned. God is the creator of dharma, but once dharma is created, God is not excused. Therefore, it is said in the Bhagavad Gita, whoever will commit adharma will be destroyed. He may be your teacher, he may be your father, he may be God himself. Therefore, ethics is ethics, value is value, dharma is dharma. Therefore, there is war. If there is no interest for protecting dharma, there is no war. So we are not animals. And war is not an animal activity because animals don't fight. Animals live a very harmonious life. They are very friendly. They only fight for food. They have no interest for acquiring power. They have no interest for acquiring any land. They have no diplomacy. We human beings fight because we claim that we are rational. Therefore, we should learn war ethics from this auspicious land, that is India, where the king will declare that I shall be killed first. My subjects will not be killed. If anybody will be killed in the war, then that first person is myself. That Ukraine president did that. Therefore, he received support from the common people. So war is natural. War is natural. War is there in our family. War is there in our society. Yesterday we are discussing about Varna Ashrama. Do you think is it not a war between Brahmin, Vaishya, Sudra, Kshatriya? Is not there war between religions? So war is a psychic trait. So that is the crisis. That is the crisis. Therefore, political leaders, they are role models because by their powerful thought, by their wonderful personalities, they can mold the psyche of common people so that their peace can prevail. Very beautifully, Srivastavaji said, Buddha or Juddha. Choice is yours. That choice is in your family, that choice is in your institution, that choice is in your society, that choice in the country, and that choice in the globe. You decide. Today we have very few participants, only 10 participants, but this discussion was wonderful. One thing I shall speak about Professor Parichha, that his speech is very informative. We really learn so many things, so many informations which we could not get from any other source. We cannot get that by reading books. One lecture is sufficient because he has such vast knowledge of international affairs. I really surprised, and his command over English language and his responses, immediate responses to any question, that and he is not disturbed by the less participants. That is the spirit of a soldier. That should be the spirit. I may die but I shall die for the truth. I shall die for the ethics. I shall die for the dharma. If I am assigned to speak something, I shall speak, even if there is only Pramod sir or only Ranjit sir and only Srivastava sir, only Rao sir. Does not matter how many people are there. This is the spirit of a soldier. And this is the ethics of a person, that I shall speak if I am assigned to speak. So without ethics, there is no question of human beings. I think this is a very successful event, and I really appreciate and I invite Professor Parichha again and again to learn about something which are unknown, which the area which is unknown to, especially to me, because we can't know about how Italy is a land of agriculture, how so many things, and I hear this YouTube video again and again. All the talks of Professor Parichha I have heard so many times. It is really wonderful, and he takes pain to deliver a talk, because he gathers so many informations, and that may be scripted, but when he responds the questions of the participants, that is not scripted. That comes from his analysis, that comes from his knowledge, and he has interest for this discussion. And the comment of Ranjit Ghosh sir was wonderful today, and as usual, Srivastava ji gave a very beautiful response to the question of Dr. Rao, that how ethics exists. If ethics does not exist, there is no question of existence of human beings, because ethics means human beings. It is understood by human beings. It is interpreted by human beings. It is applied by human beings. And for that, war is necessary. Without war, ethics cannot be protected. If somebody will enter into my house and try to kill me, I shall be a gentleman? No, I shall fight. That is war, and that is ethical. Because I may go to jail, but I shall fight with that criminal in order to save my child, in order to save myself. I have to protect dharma. I should fight. What happens today? What is the real crisis? The psychic crisis, that we all behave like Arjuna. That no, if my teacher is committing a mistake, I shall not say. If the government is committing some mistake, I shall not say, because my service will be in trouble. This is not the spirit of a soldier. This is not this war ethics. War ethics is that if you find any injustice anywhere, don't support it. And Mahatma Gandhi did that through non-violence, through non-cooperation. That is a separate thing we shall discuss other day. But war, and very beautifully in the Bhagavad Gita, and according to the interpretation of Mahatma Gandhi on Bhagavad Gita, war is not violence. We shall discuss that. How war is not violence. War is not violence if it is meant for the protection of dharma. War is violence if it is meant for acquiring power. Anything other than, any purpose other than protecting dharma, protecting the ethical values, is violence. That war is a violent war. In this context, we can say the intention of USA and to some extent Russia can be bracketed under the violent war. But when the country is trying to protect itself, that war is not violence, that is dharma. One should protect its country and its countrymen. I became emotional and I spoke more, which I should not speak. today I decided not to speak, but I was excited by the comment of Professor Ranjit Ghosh sir, Professor Srivastava and um, I was extremely inspired by the beautiful, wonderful talk of Professor Parichha. With this, and I am grateful to all the participants. I could not ask others to ask questions because of the paucity of time. Yes, this discussion is always open to all. It is uploaded in the YouTube. Tomorrow we can view it again and again. Thank you. I thank you all. With this meeting is declared closed. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Nice deliberation.
Thank you, Srivastava ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gosda.